Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Safe Schools Rainbow Roundtable. I'm Dr. Dan and it's a pleasure to have you join us. Today we delve into a critical and timely theme, redefining queerness in the 21st century. This episode is a journey through the multifaceted experiences of LGBTQ+ youth as we explore how their relationships can redefine and transcend traditional norms. Today's conversation will uncover what truly makes LGBTQ+ relationships thrive. From the importance of assurances and supportive social networks to mastering the art of developing ethical codes of conduct. We're going deep into the specifics of what these relationships need to flourish, especially in an ever-evolving social and legal landscape. We have an incredible lineup of panelists ready to share their insights. But before we hear from them, let me give you a glimpse of our journey ahead. We'll start with a journey through history and our historical overview, exploring the roots and evolution of LGBTQ+ activism and how it shapes today's relationship dynamics. Then, in real-life experiences, we'll share fictional stories illuminating how LGBTQ+ youth navigate the complexities of relationships, challenging and redefining traditional norms. In our Tools and Resources segment, we'll dive into practical strategies and supports for LGBTQ+ individuals. This will include discussions on platonic relationships, the nuances of romantic connections across the spectrum of sexuality and gender identity, and how ethical frameworks can enrich these relationships. And finally, in the Future Outlook, we'll envision the future of LGBTQ+ relationships. We'll explore how these connections continue to redefine themselves in the 21st century and how expanding queerness can deepen intersectional connections, breaking free from the confines of heteronormative structures of the past. Now, let's meet our Safe Schools Rainbow Roundtable panelists. Each have unique knowledge and experience. This is Harold Marrero. Harold is the Chief Operating Officer of Safe Schools. Welcome, Harold.
Thank you, Dan. I'm so happy to be here.
Glad to have you here as well. And we also have Tiffany Williams. She is the Director of Outreach for Safe Schools and is host of the popular show Tiffany Explains It All. Welcome, Tiffany.
Hi, Dan. I'm really looking forward to today's topics and discussions.
I am too. And then we have Ame Leon. They are the Executive Director of Reflect Collective, an organization that serves queer, trans, POC survivors of sexual and domestic violence in South Florida. Welcome, Ame.
Welcome, and thank you for having me here.
Pleasure to have you. And then we have David Torres. David is a Miami-Dade public school student. Welcome, David.
Hello, thank you for having me once again.
Of course. And then we have Jalea Prendergast. Jalea is a Miami-Dade public school student as well.
Hello, thank you guys for letting me join you guys today.
Happy to have you. So thank you, panelists. With such a wealth of expertise at our table, we're set for a meaningful exploration. In this segment, we journey through history to explore the roots and evolution of LGBTQ+ activism and the challenges faced by this community. This historical overview will set the stage for understanding the contemporary dynamics of LGBTQ+ relationships, particularly among youth. The story of LGBTQ+ rights and recognition is one of resilience in the face of adversity. For centuries, individuals who deviated from traditional gender roles or expressed same-sex love faced persecution from various authorities. Yet, these oppressive conditions also sparked a growing awareness of diverse identities and the need for change. The journey towards LGBTQ+ acceptance began as a response to long-standing prejudice. Initial movements for rights and recognition formed amidst a complex interplay of scientific revelations, emerging media, and ideals of human rights. This period saw activists from diverse backgrounds, drawing inspiration from medical studies, banned literature, and the burgeoning concept of democracy. The dawn of sexology in Western history marked the beginning of a nuanced understanding of homosexuality. Early researchers, though often limited by their biases, began to challenge prevailing notions of sexuality and gender. This period also saw the first stirrings of advocacy, albeit in a nascent form, as individuals like Magnus Hirschfeld in Germany began collecting and disseminating information about gay culture. The world wars played a crucial role in shaping LGBTQ+ history. They provided opportunities for gay men and women to meet and form communities, both as soldiers and war workers. In the post-war era, Especially in the United States, urban centers became hubs of gay life, fostering a culture of resistance and self-expression. The civil rights movement of the 1960s catalyzed a parallel push for LGBTQ+ rights. Figures like Bard Rustin demonstrated the interconnectedness of these struggles. This era also witnessed the birth of significant LGBTQ+ organizations and the first gay rights demonstrations, marking a shift from mere survival to active advocacy. A pivotal moment in LGBTQ+ history was the Stonewall Riots of 1969. This uprising against police brutality in New York's Greenwich Village ignited a global gay liberation movement, leading to the annual Pride marches that celebrate LGBTQ+ identity and resilience. Despite the progress made, the LGBTQ+ community continues to face significant challenges. From the AIDS epidemic to the struggle for legal recognition and equal rights, their journey towards full acceptance and equality is ongoing. This history, filled with both triumphs and trials, forms the backdrop against which today's LGBTQ+ youth navigate their relationships. Now, I'd like to turn to our panelists. Based on this rich history, how do you see the past influencing the present struggles and triumphs of LGBTQ+ youth in their relationships?
So it's interesting for you to ask that because, unfortunately, in today's world, we're not allowed to talk about the past anymore in the public sphere, especially in this state. But as I was doing research for this episode, one of the things that I came across was that throughout the world, obviously, we have existed. LGBTQ+ people have existed since the beginning of time, since the first humans stood up and started to walk around, in two limbs. And across many cultural aspects, deviating from the norm was actually viewed as something that was okay and even celebrated, especially in early society and early human history. And a lot of people tend to think that, yes, the Greeks and the Romans, and other cultures of that time, they were very accepting. But the funny thing is that acceptance happened only as their societies were thriving and there was an openness to what was happening. People were allowed to be themselves and fully express themselves. When societies turned inward, especially during the Greek city-states and the Roman Empire, when it became an empire, the first people that were targeted were those that fell, not just that they were LGBTQ+ or they were actually gay men, but it was those that fell outside of the gender norms. So men who would back then we would call them trans. Today we call them trans. Back then there wasn't a word for it. They were the first ones targeted, and across time, even later on during the colonial era, a lot of the places that European colonialism got to and started to undo what was happening there, they were also very accepting of LGBTQ+ people. So it was the European perspective of trying to subjugate that change of that. So all this to say that it's very interesting how even in today's culture, we see that LGBTQ+ acceptance has, as we went through the historical moment, we've seen it that it has thrived and become more mainstream, but now we're seeing society turn inward, and the same people that were attacked back in the day are now the first ones being attacked today.
It's actually interesting that you talk about other cultures because there's so many cultures in the world where LGBT identities were not only in existence and thriving and whatnot, but they were celebrated and were sacred. So I actually am from a Taino background. So the Taino people are the indigenous people of the Caribbean. And we actually celebrated LGBT identities. And not only did we celebrate, but we actually considered them sacred, specifically trans people actually. So trans people were called Biawaisa, which is basically the modern term for indigenous trans people, also known as Two-Spirit. So that's a pan-indigenous term, by the way, which means that it encompasses all trans identities within indigenous societies, all across the Americas. And it's really interesting that today in our land, we're seeing the persecution of identities where, previously in indigenous societies, they were celebrated. We were sacred. We were literally people who were the faces of, you know, our societies. And I think it's like really interesting that we went from that to now being hidden, now being, you know, not celebrated, but more so persecuted, and invisible even sometimes. So I think it's interesting. And I think that eventually we will start to go towards a movement where we're not even like moving forward, but we're moving backwards, in the sense that like we're going to be going towards that society where these things were celebrated and they will be again. And it's just the cycle of, you know, oppression and liberation that's happening right now.
Mm-hmm. Just to go off of what you had mentioned, it's interesting to look back in our history, because there's like these little like LGBTQ plus like blip moments where it was like, oh, okay, especially during like the World War, where a lot of the men left the country and they were fighting, and you had all these women that were now taking on the men's roles, and you saw a really huge surge of like female love. Like there's so much like advertisements of like, it was okay like if you know had a girlfriend during that time period, because it was just like, hey, there's no men, so like, you know, I like you, that's cool, like all right, we can just like make out, that's fine. And it's really fascinating because yes, we are more, I guess, talking about these topics now, versus in the past it was never brought up as forward as it is now. But there's like so many people that still like feel uncomfortable on those topics, that they feel like, oh, because I'm uncomfortable and I don't really know the subject, I'm going to tell you that basically you're wrong, and that the way you express yourself or live is not the right way. And I have a personal problem with that, because I'm just like, who is anyone to tell that to anybody? You know, like, it's your life. You only have one life to live. You should be exactly who you are, no matter what. And it's just really sad, because it's like we're so close, yet we're so far. And like there's just so many people that want to keep pushing us backwards, because they're so afraid, because they're afraid that us being who we are is going to be the new norm, and they can't fathom or can't understand it. So they're just like, okay, we're just going to keep pushing and pushing and pushing you as far into the darkness. And it's like, no, that's not how this is going to work. And the thing is like, we've seen it like with Stonewall. Like, you pushed people so far into the back that they're like, okay, fine, then we're going to push back. You know, we're going to like stand up for ourselves. We're going to like basically fight against you, because it's not fair that you get to live your life the way you want to, and yet we can't even be in the same spaces as you.
And I also like want to talk about what you said earlier, how they were praised and worshipped basically for being different, for not fitting into the box, for not conforming. But then at some point, like how also, Harold, how you mentioned the European colonialism, that it turned into less of like embrace people that are different, but it turned more into at some point that's to everyone has to like kind of fit this mold, and anyone that's different doesn't fit. So it's just really interesting to me to see the agenda that was being introduced, that we started out celebrating differences, and then it just converted into something along the lines of like fitting everyone into the box. It just like turned into that, and I think that's very interesting.
I liked what you guys said. What I got from that is it's just very tiring to have to witness these cycles of just like hate, such like intense hate, like from like so I'm Jamaican, so Jamaicans are very homophobic, and it's just so hurtful to have to witness them say these things. And it's obviously it's not just them, but it's just having to witness these cycles of hate. And then I feel like for a while, from like 2010 to like maybe 2016, there was a lot of love for Pride. Like the Pride community was like, it was very big, it was very nice. But then now, like after 2020, I feel like things have just gone so dark. Yeah. Like you're on like social media and like you'll see comments, like I follow like a bunch of transgender creators, and the comments are just so brutal and people are just so hurtful. I'm just like, there was just it's just so sad to see like there was a big love for like all these kinds of, like it was beautiful, and now it's just so depressing.
But you can see the historical, repeat of whenever a society gets stressed out and there's a lot of anxiety, the first people that suffer, the first people that take the ire of those who are anxious are those that fall outside of the norm. And unfortunately, our trans siblings fall outside of the norm for what they think, what they believe is the norm, and they're the ones that take the first. They're the ones that take the first barrage of hatred as people try to evacuate their collective anxiety and put it into something else and blame them. Like, it's their fault that our society is falling apart. It is the fault of not just the trans community, but the entire alphabet, the rainbow alphabet. It's their fault that things are falling apart. I was recently, I don't know if anyone saw an Atlas airplane as a cargo plane. They had an engine trouble and they were flying back to the airport here in Miami, but you can see sparks coming out. And someone recorded it and put it on Instagram. Mm-hmm. And they were like, someone asked the question, can somebody please explain why these things keep happening? And then someone answered it. It's like, oh, it's because of diverse hire. It's because they hire people of color. They hire, LGBTQ plus people. They hire women. And I'm like, how does that even make sense? Like, what is wrong with you?
That's the whole point. You say, I don't mean to say it, make it sound like this. You say something, you answer a question with a stupid answer, and people who don't know any better will be like, wow, that makes so much sense. When it's like, no, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. Yeah. No, it doesn't at all. And to piggyback off of what you were discussing about, like, I've noticed the same thing, that people in our own community who don't understand our trans brothers and sisters, they're like, oh, everything bad that's happening to us, it's your fault. It's like, whoa.
Like take a step back.
Like, okay, granted, yes, we're all tense, we're all nervous. Okay, yes, let's not blame people. But it's interesting because I have students that I've spoken to that are either non-binary or trans, and they have parents who are gay. And they have told me, they're like, my own parents that are part of the same community don't understand me. And they ask me, like, why am I the way I am? And it's really sad to see them, because I could see, like, basically like a betrayal of, like, I thought, like, you of all people would understand what I go through. Maybe not the same way, but, like, you understand that we're in the same category. And I think now more than ever, we're seeing more of, like, that realization of, like, it's bad enough that we deal with the hate outside the community, and now we have people in the community that spread that same hate. And you even have, like, older generations that don't understand the newer generation, and they're like, this is all new. It's like, no, this is not new. None of this is new. This is not like somebody just woke up one day and they were like, I think today I'm going to be non-binary. Well, or be trans.
Yeah. It's actually kind of interesting because, again, when we go back to the history, one of the main, like, ways that, Europeans were able to colonize us to begin with was because they saw our queerness and they demonized it. So, for example, with the Spaniards, they saw that there were trans people living, like, freely. They saw that there were just queer people in existence, and they took it back to Spain, and they're like, this is the reason why, we should, like, colonize these people, and why we are superior to them. So it was a justification, and that's the mentality that we actually see right now. Mm-hmm. Right now, today, like, people legitimately believe that they are superior to queer people because they are heterosexual, because they're cisgender and stuff like that. And that, even, like you said, within our queer societies still believe that, because, for example, gay people think that they're superior to trans people because they're not trans. Mm-hmm. So that mentality has prevailed all throughout this time to uphold what's termed as white supremacy. Mm. So that's just, like, an interesting tidbit. And also, to go back to what you said, it's interesting because, like, in the 1800s was when we first started hearing the terms homosexual and heterosexual. And it's funny because a lot of people are like, oh, but, like, these are new terms. Like, what you're saying, these are new. Honey, homosexual and heterosexual wasn't invented until the 1800s.
Right.
So what are you talking about new? If it's new, heterosexual is new too. So.
Yeah.
But isn't it, these are great points, because I think it shows just the echoes and cycles throughout time that just repeat over and over, and how in present day this awareness and this conversation can help us begin to break these cycles and understand, I think unconsciously, what goes on in society around power dynamics and depression and the ways in which those who feel threatened try to reclaim power through hatred. And it's only through these types of discussions that we can begin to try to be different as a society.